everyone. This is Nick from Tenacity.ai with my co-host Jason. Today on the show, we're going to talk about how FinOps can improve the bottom line. And I think, we'll jump in here first sort of with the world without cloud or without having a FinOps discipline, what sorts of things happen, and then maybe jump to the sorts of outcomes that you would expect once you have implemented FinOps and drive more adoption of cloud. But I'd almost jump in right away, Jason, with one of the things that's driven me nuts for years, I've posted about this recently, is this whole question of how does XYZ affect my bottom line? It's such a narrow set of answers that you can give that are right, because the answer always has to be that it makes the bottom line better. And that's not necessarily always what you want to do, right? So sometimes you want to impact growth, which may not actually make your bottom line better in the short term. It'll make it better in the long term. Or you might be implementing more predictability, and that doesn't necessarily mean that your bottom line's impacted until you make decisions around that predictability, right? So data-driven decisions, et cetera. So, I just start right off the bat by saying, I think we're probably going to answer this question of how does FinOps improve your bottom line, by more accurately answering how does FinOps actually impact your financials, and what sorts of levers does it allow you to pull. So, Jason, from kind of the outset, you've gone cloud, you've done some transformation, some percentage of workloads are in the cloud, you don't yet have FinOps implemented, or you haven't yet thought about this practice of managing variable spending in the cloud. What sorts of things happen to an organization?
Well, I'd say from just a very high level, depending on the complexity and maturity of the organization and how they're leveraging the cloud, it's really difficult to get the full value from it without implementing some of the things at the very least that are prescribed from a FinOps perspective. And, honestly, we see it often, right? You see projects getting stalled, maybe not quite getting the value from the migration to the cloud, which is often starts with a lift and shift, right? But without implementing some of the practices, it's going to be very difficult to get down to unit economics, get the right value from the cloud, map the value getting from the cloud to business related decisions. There's a whole host of things that are going to be very difficult to achieve if you don't have processes in place to understand this data.
Yeah, I think a very early problem in it pre-exists cloud, sort of a legacy IT problem, but you can bring it with you to cloud, and cloud helps you get away from this problem, and that's IT gridlock, right? The whole idea of the business has a need, respond to the market, they make a request, and that request gets lost in the ticketing system for 30 days, 45 days, sometimes forever. And, you don't necessarily get what you need in the time that you need it. And when infrastructure has been turned into software, we've changed the underlying dynamics. There is no longer this long ordering process, needing to buy new stuff, physically having to rack it and connect it and do all this work that leads to the ability to actually finally get to the software component. Cloud has made it software right out the gate. But I've seen, in these shifts as enterprises move, especially in a lift and shift, move their workloads, they're not yet solving the sort of cloud or IT gridlock problem. So I think that's one of them that's, without FinOps, without having metrics around understanding cloud spending and understanding how quickly you can move in cloud. I think that's a big one.
Absolutely.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I said absolutely. Go ahead and finish your statement.
Well, and I was just gonna touch on the whole, lift and shift. I think that sometimes lift and shift is such a big project for an enterprise application that it oftentimes feels like the bulk of the transformation. And even if it's, say, it might take 80 or 90% of the time, and it might be a very large project. And so, it's sort of that the last 20% of the project actually kind of takes 80% of the thought and effort and all of that behind it, which is the next stage, which is going from lift and shift to actually getting value out of cloud, which does mean changes around that legacy app after you actually land it in the cloud. And I think that there are times, sometimes lift and shift is easy, but there are times that I've experienced where lift and shift just unfortunately takes a lot of planning. It can be very technical. It can incorporate a lot of people, a lot of opinions, a lot of feedback, a lot of roadblocks, that it can oftentimes feel like that's the majority of the project, and sometimes it falls off there, and so you don't actually get to the value.
Yeah, well, right. And if you're only doing the lift and shift portion of whatever you're calling your digital transformation or your migration to the cloud, you're in effect not getting the true value from the cloud, because primarily lift and shift deals with a lot of legacy compute, right? I mean, that's for the most part anyway. There's not a lot of people developing their own functions, and or there hasn't been historically lately anyway. So if to get the true value of migrating to the cloud, lift and shift is a phase, or it's the first step, right? It's not the end goal. The end goal is to modernize, because that's when you get the true leverage that's when you leverage the benefits of the cloud truly. So it's really easy to cost and price and understand unit economics around an individual server and things like that, but it becomes far more difficult when you start to spread that application across many different functions, or whatever the case may be, right? And that's when you really start to need something like FinOps internally to help you navigate through that mess, the chaos that comes from the cloud.
Mm-hmm. So let's tie it up to actually FinOps as a practice, as to the efforts of optimization and cost management in the cloud, because it is different than legacy cost management. So if I were listening right now, I probably would go like, well, so what? I mean, lift and shift and sort of IT gridlock, those problems are not really cloud problems. Those are sort of organizational problems, or those are process problems. What the heck does FinOps do to help me solve this problem?
Well, one, you start by allocating the entire, the process of just allocating your entire environment is one of the most critical steps, right? One, you're going to uncover that you can't allocate your entire environment, for most likely, right? I mean, that's usually what it is. So, and if you're starting out in a position where you can't allocate your entire environment, that means you're in a position where you can't understand all of these costs, right? So that just the process of going through and making sure that you can allocate everything and it's all appropriately allocated, even if it's to an allocation group of unknown, right? At least you understand all your costs, so you can start to document, because knowing and having the data is the first step in any of this. So I think one of the real benefits, the first benefits or initial benefits you get, is the understanding of where all your costs are going, and what should I be paying for and what shouldn't I be paying for is the first step in this journey.
I think there's this piece, and definitely this is coming from the product side of it, important to me. The sort of product economics, or trying to understand unit costs, in the legacy model was always a guess. So you're kind of guessing at what I can support based on some hardware I'm going to have to purchase. And when you get to the cloud world, you enter the reality of kind of data-driven decision making, so long as you embrace that reality. But you're actually getting the real data. Like, this is really what it's costing you. And you can start to understand how much of that guess was a hedge or how much of it was a waste. And that's one of the very near-term kind of follow-on things from a lift and shift that I think doesn't always get done, is then really trying to understand what sort of data-driven decisions I should be making about that legacy infrastructure to modify it to actually run it in a more cost-effective state. Because I guarantee it was over-allocated, over-purchased in the legacy IT model prior to the lift and shift. We had to do that, right? Because you were trying to predict out 3 to 5 years.
Had to.
So now you're seeing a real cost. It's you're seeing that real monthly cost or real daily cost or even just real fractional costs happening at a transaction level inside of your billing file. And so now you can start to make smart decisions around what you should do with that infrastructure and that variable cloud spending. So I think that's one of the early ones. Definitely driving accountability. So you have folks who want to act upon that, and then certainly actually seeing the data and understanding what you should do. So what let's take it from there. So we've tied FinOps to sort of these first actions. Why FinOps as a practice is important to have. So let's take it to the next logical step. What is, as an enterprise transitions and they want to build this practice, and they want to mature this practice, what are the sorts of outcomes that they can expect as the practice matures?
Getting more value from the cloud, I think we've kind of outlined that, right? And on aligning the value you're getting from the cloud to what truly matters from the business. You're going to be able to answer the questions on why and where, like why is my spending going up or down, and where or what is the cause of my spending going down? Where in my environment is that? And knowing those two things off the bat, like they alleviate so many concerns, stalling of projects and whatnot. If you can understand what a project's going to cost you up front from a cloud perspective, it's probably going to make things go a little bit smoother. So getting true value, business value from the cloud, understanding where all your costs are going. And, it's not all about saving money. FinOps isn't, right? It's about financial management. But one of the byproducts of it is saving money, because every company we've ever talked to or ever worked with has had resources out there that were either not sized properly, shouldn't be turned on, right? They're abandoned or idle. And so one of the byproducts of implementing this strategy is the ability to save money, and not just save it on what people are used to doing. They're used to going out and doing a project to clean up the environment. Then 3, 6, 9 months later, it's back to where it was before, right? FinOps gives you the tools to make sure that you're always operating your environment from an optimized perspective, and that you always have the answers to the questions on where are my costs going, what are my unit economics, what's driving all of these factors.
So I guess let's touch on you kind of hit on a couple of areas there, but let's touch on the sort of, just to answer the question of directly affecting my bottom line. I'm going to be able to clean up waste in my environment. So direct effect on the bottom line. I'm going to drop dollars down to my EBITDA. And so then there's also rate-based optimization. So I'm going to be able to commit to using certain things, and that is going to lower my overall cost, therefore dropping savings right down to my bottom line. So those are, the sorts of two economic drivers for impacting or driving bottom line. But there's all these other sorts of value points, and I think you touched on them in the beginning of that there, which was, visibility, transparency, this idea of data-driven decisions. So now I can get predictability. Mm-hmm. So once I have predictability, then I can start to make decisions about things I want to do, and what kind of outcomes I can expect from a cloud cost perspective down the road. So it may not have a near-term positive impact on bottom line, but it may have a long-term positive impact on bottom line. And being able to predict that with some accuracy is pretty important. I think the other one, and I don't know if you touched on this one, but real-time feedback. Real-time feedback is something that pre-cloud world we didn't really have. We tried to achieve it. We would buy all these different monitoring tools, all these different tools for analyzing our network infrastructure, our database infrastructure, et cetera, to try and help us understand, in real time what was going on or what impact we were having based on what we were doing. We never really had a lot of success. And now we have, the ability to actually look in real time at the impact of what we're deploying and what it's doing to the bill, or at least near real time, right? And to be able to have the Prius effect where, I push the pedal, I see how much energy that's using and how much that's decreasing my range. I let up on the pedal because I want to maximize my range. The same thing happens in cloud. I can show engineers where you can show me that I'm having an impact, I can start to make decisions closer to the time I made the change in the environment to really drive optimal outcomes.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I think FinOps is designed to help companies increase revenue, lower the cost it takes to support that revenue, and allow companies to truly leverage the benefits of the cloud without the apprehension that comes with it. And so that's what we're talking about.
I think that's a big one right there too, is that apprehension often is the delay to automation in the cloud, that not wanting the machine to do something bad a lot of times, right? That can be the leadership apprehension. And when you have that data that shows that the cloud can do good things and then you can automate that, that's how you get rid of the gridlock problem, right? You no longer have to wait on someone to deploy infrastructure for you. You can just deploy it yourself because you have real-time feedback. You have now data coming back to show you the impact that you just created. I'd say, as one final note, we should touch on kind of unit economics. Unit economics, they can be easy to conceive of. They can actually be really hard to get to. It depends on what you're trying to get to, but you want to think about unit economics in the context of your business. I think everyone sort of thinks about unit economics from a revenue perspective. For every dollar of revenue, what's my COGS? And that can still be, you can absolutely get to that. You can absolutely achieve that, but that can be hard. It can be hard to think that way. And sometimes you got to think about the sorts of drivers that are happening on the back end of your application. So, if your product that you're selling, it's not necessarily yet revenue that you're thinking about, but maybe you're thinking about it in numbers of amount of patient data that you're loading, or size of data that you're receiving, or something to that effect, so that you can actually start to break down the unit economics of what's happening on the back end or what's happening in your data layer. It'll help you drive more decisions around what's happening than maybe at the business layer, on up through what's actually happening at revenue. So think of unit economics, think of those product economics from kind of the base technical stuff, and then drive them up towards what it means from a revenue perspective. That can get really intimidating, really frustrating if you're not breaking it down.
Absolutely.
Cool. I think we probably covered that topic on how to have an impact on your cloud financials. Jason, any parting thoughts?
We covered it, man.
All right. Head up to tenacity.ai, download the Cloud Cost Optimization Handbook. Always love your feedback. We're always updating that handbook, as well as our product and product information as well. So please keep that feedback coming back to us. Tune in next time for more on FinOps on the Cloud Cost Optimization Podcast. Thank you.